Hello all, welcome to your homework video for the evening. What you're going to be doing today is going through some different measurement situations, and depending on which kind of measurement device we're looking at, figuring out what the certain and uncertain places are with the measurement to get the answer proper for the device. So let's take a look at a couple. Okay, so here we have a standard centimeter ruler, and we have a lot of information given to us here. We can tell, for instance, right away that we have our whole numbers. So we have tick marks for every whole centimeter along this line. But then also, in addition to our whole centimeters, you can also see that there are 10 lines in between each whole number. So our centimeter has been broken up into tenths. So we're also going to be able to tell which tenth something lies between. So if we're looking at measurements and we see that something, falls right here, we can tell that for sure. We know that that is greater than 3. So it's going to be 3.6 because that's where it falls on our ruler. And when we take measurements, we're going to write down as many certain values as possible, but then we're also going to be estimating one more place and record one uncertain value. So with this ruler right here, we're going to look at our red line and our green line in a minute. We're going to want to record our ones place, because we know that for certain, our tenths place, because that's for certain, and then our estimated place using this measurement device here is going to be our hundredths. So let's look at a couple of these lines here and see what we can come up with. So I'm just going to move the ruler up here, and I put the line right on top of the ruler so it'll make it a little bit easier for us to take a peek at it here. So we have our red line. We know for sure that it's going to be greater than 3 because that's going to be our ones value because it's past the 3 but not to the 4. Then for our tenths, I know it's gone past 1, 2, 3, 4 of those tick marks. So it's in between 4 tenths and 5 tenths. And so here's where I need to estimate. And for this line here, it's really, really close to that 4. I need to think of there being another 10 divisions between 4 tenths and 5 tenths. So if I'm going to do that in my mind, I'm going to estimate that that's going to be a 1. So my answer for this measurement would be 3.41 centimeters. Okay? Now, not everyone is going to estimate that last one exactly the same, but we need to be close, so we should all be getting relatively close answers, but there's no way you should have said 3.47 for something like this, so just keep that in mind. Okay, so now let's look at our green line here and see what we can come up with for that, if I can quit writing all over the place here. All right, so let's bring our green line down and do the same thing. Okay, so looking at this, I can tell that for sure my ones place is going to be a 2. Okay, because we're past the 2 but not to the 3. And again, it looks like we are past the 4 tenths but not to the 5th. And here's where we get to estimate. So I would say that that's pretty close to the middle. So for me, I would say 2.45 centimeters would be the measurement for this line. Now you could have said 2.44, you could have said 2.46. Anything in there that's reasonable will be accepted as an answer. Okay, so again, our certain digits plus we add 1 that's an estimation. All right, now we have a different ruler. Same rules apply as far as certain stuff and uncertain stuff, but now we're looking at something that uses millimeters, and we've got our big lines are 10 millimeter markings. So that means that our lines in between are 1 millimeter. So our 10s are going to be certain, our 1s are going to be certain, and this time it's going to be our tenths that are estimated. So let's take a look at a couple of these lines and see what we can do. All right, so for our purple line, I know that my tens value is going to be 30, okay? Because I'm past 30 but not to 40. Then after that, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. So 34 point, and now I get to estimate. I would say that that's about 34.8. And on my label, you know, looking back at my ruler, my label is millimeters. So 34.8 millimeters is what I would mark for that. Okay? All right, so now let's take our ruler up here to the brown line. And here we have another situation. So I've got my brown line here. I know that it's going to be between 0 and 10 for my tens value. So I'm not going to write anything down because it's a 0. And to me, that looks like it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as my ones place. Now, that to me looks exactly on the line, which means I'm going to say 5.0 millimeters. Okay, so that is how we take care of measurements with rulers. Here we have a graduated cylinder. Now you've used graduated cylinders before in your science classes for sure in 9th grade with Mrs. Jans. And when we are going to read a graduated cylinder, you need to make sure that you're right at eye level with the top of the liquid, and we see that there's a dip there. Okay? We want to make sure that whenever we're reading a graduated cylinder, that you want to look at the bottom of the dip, okay? That the dip is called the meniscus. So we want to read the bottom. So on here, again, same thing. We need to look at what are our markings so we can see what our certain ones are and then estimate our last uncertain. So here on our graduated cylinder, this big long line is right here is 20 and up here is 25. So that looks like you got to do a little bit more figuring with the graduated cylinders. Looks like right here we've got 21, 22, 23, 24, and those other ones are half markings. So to start to read this, I know that we're higher than 20. I know that we're higher than 21, but we're not to 22, so 21. Okay, now I also know that it's above 21.5 because that's what that line right there means, is as our halfway point. So now we need to estimate how far in between that is between 21.5 and 22. And to me it looks pretty close to 21.5, so I'm just going to say 25.52. And here we are dealing in milliliters since it's a graduated cylinder. One more graduated cylinder to look at before we get to your practice problems. So you can see that as far as our lines, we've got our 6 is right here and our 8 is right there. So that means that this guy right here is 7. So then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 lines in between the 6 and the 7. So each one of these is 2/10. Okay? That's how these are going to go. So now when we read this, I know that it's more than 6, but less than 7. I can tell for sure that we're over 0.246. Okay, so 6.6, and so we're in between 6.6 and 6.8, so I need to estimate, I'm going to say 6.64 milliliters. All right. So there's some practice ones for you to see how we're going to read these. What you need to do with the rest of this video is on a sheet of paper, you need to number 1 through 10. And I have some practice problems on here for you. You are going to be turning this in tomorrow when you get to class. First thing, when you come in the door, take your sheet of paper, make sure your name's on it, and put it in the tray. This is instead of doing a quiz on Edmodo. But basically, it's your proof you did your homework like you were supposed to. So, go ahead and do 1 through 5. Pause the video so that you can get them all done before you go on to the next one to make sure you have enough time. So here we have centimeters on our ruler. So make sure you pause it and do these. Okay, so 6, 7, 8, and 9 are graduated cylinders. On your paper, record how many milliliters you see in each of these. So make sure that you pause the video, get down all those before you move on to number 10. And the last question I want you to do to turn in for your homework is to explain the general rule for taking measurements, no matter what device is used. So we went through rulers and graduated cylinders. We had general guidelines that we followed that were the same no matter which one we used. So you can either do those in a sentence or bullet points, whatever you want, but just go for general rules. So make sure that's all done to turn in when you get to class in the morning. And then we have in-class activities tomorrow that are going to deal with taking measurements in the lab and using some of these devices in our hands-on activities. So see you in the morning. Bye.